Here they come.
Cool.
Give it a minute and make sure that we are live and that everything's working. Okay, looks good. Brilliant. Okay, we are on. Okay, and welcome. Hello, everybody. Just give us a bit of a wave and say hello and let us know where you're joining us from. If you're joining us live on Zoom, you will notice that there is a Q&A and a chat box, so you can jump in there and say hello. If you have a particular question about our session today, you can do that in the Q&A. Otherwise, if it's just general banter, you can pop that into the chat. Make sure you do it to all participants. So there are two options in the chat. If you're joining us live on Zoom, you can see to everyone. Make sure that you do that to everyone. So welcome, everybody. My name is Danielle Stein-Fairhurst. I am a financial modelling and Excel specialist. I'm based in Sydney, Australia, and it has been a while since I ran one of these sessions. So I used to do these like once a week during lockdown and, all the times when we weren't having these public sessions. But now that things are starting to go back, we're doing a little bit less of them. But based on the response, I think there's still quite an appetite for these live sessions. So we might see if we can do a few more of these later on this year. So today, I am joined by Paul Martin. Hi, Paul. Thank you for coming along today. Hi. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Paul before I hand over to him. I first met Paul when last year in London. So I was running a live masterclass session like during the summer, the English summer time. And that's where we first met. And then we were doing some support. As part of that, we would catch up as part of our support office hours sessions after that. And then we were just at the Global Excel Summit, just last month, at the beginning of this month. So we caught up again then. So yeah, tell us a bit. I'm not going to try to introduce you, Paul. I'm sure you'll do a much better job of that. So maybe tell us a bit about yourself, Paul.
Okay, what I'll do then, if you don't mind, Daniel, I'll just flip into the share screen if I can, and if you could just check that everyone
oh my
can
goodness,
see.
we've got people from all over: Dubai, San Diego, Singapore, Kenya, Melbourne, all over. Oh my gosh. So
Okay,
yeah,
well, I guess the first is good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, actually.
Yeah.
So thank you all for taking the time out. I know very busy schedules for doing this, and a big thanks to Danielle for putting this together, because certainly aware of how much effort it takes. So my name is Paul Martin, and what we'll do is, if we just go on to a little bit about me. I'm managing director of a company called Excel in Business. We specialize in analytics software on the Microsoft platform. We only work with Microsoft technology. We build apps in Power BI and Excel, and we have our own Excel add-in, which we'll talk about today, and you'll be able to get a free copy of that at the end when we talk about that at the end. And I've been kind of involved pretty much all my working career in management information, or MI. 400 plus implementations from people like Reuters and Morgan Stanley at the corporate end, right the way down to perhaps small hospices, putting in a simple financial reporting application. And with regards to the Microsoft BI stack, been kind of around here since the beginning here in 2000, where Microsoft brought out their first multi-dimensional database called OLAP Services. OLAP Services was rebranded to Analysis Services, and then Analysis Services ultimately became the engine that we're all excited about and passionate about within Power BI. And the thing I really want to bring out is I'm a fanatical Excel fan, absolutely fanatical. And I guess the thing that I want to bring out today is, as Microsoft says, but I'm not sure how many people are believing at the moment, it's not Excel or Power BI. It really isn't. That is the number one question I'm sure we all get. But it really, really is about an and, because there is so much more you can do with that. So the other thing I also found from going to Danielle's session last July was that I also found the Excel community is a bit fragmented as well. There are some of the people on there that are, I only touch it if it's in Excel. I don't want to have anything outside of Excel. And there's people more like myself that's saying, No. We want to put this into a corporate database and use Excel as the front end. And that was really evident in the session, because I think when I attended Danielle's session, I realized I was going to be bottom of the class for the first day and 3/4. And we were going through stuff with shortcuts, and Danielle saying, if you're doing financial modeling, you need to be able to use keyboard because, mouse isn't fast enough. So I kind of hid in the corner, not knowing any of this stuff, and kind of used my mouse and hope people didn't really notice. But then when we got to the end of the session, we did a session where Danielle said, I've got 6 Excel workbooks all prepared for you, and I want you to make an application out of those by joining those together in Excel. And my immediate reaction was, I'm not going to do that exercise. What a waste of time.
You were a terrible student, Paul. You didn't even do the exercise because you could do it so much better.
I did. That was the thing. I did it in 30 seconds. I just didn't do it in the way they wanted it. And what struck me there was that, I looked at the sort of stuff that you were doing with dynamic arrays and think, how useful is that when we bring data from things like Power BI into Excel? But really, we've all got to kind of come to this thing that life has moved on now. We can, by taking the data outside Excel, actually make things so much more powerful, but not lose any of the flexibility of Excel when we're actually doing the reporting. And that, I guess, is the key thing. It's the key thing that I think a lot of people have a fear of.
And that's what I'm really interested to hear about in your session today, because I think we do, and I do think of it like that, are we going to do it in Excel or are we going to do it in Power BI? Because, you can't sort of easily go from one to another. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I want to be is a little bit provocative here. And I want you guys as well, if you're out there kind of thinking,
that's the point of having these sessions, is for people to challenge us and to put in their 2 cents worth. So you're happy for people to kind of say what they think, aren't you, Paul?
Yeah, because I'm going to kick that off. I'm going to say, for example, which I'm sure will get some interest and maybe some questions. If I was the Microsoft program manager now, the first thing I would do is rip out Power Query out of Excel and throw it away. I don't see it serves any purpose.
I had no idea you were going to say that, Paul.
No, I thought I'd keep that from you, Danielle, just to
spice it up. Oh my gosh.
That's what
Why? Do tell us more. Tell us more.
So
you're getting a bit of
hate mail on
You are. Okay.
Just bear with me, guys. Just bear with me. But the other thing I'm going to
I think you're going to have to stop right there and explain yourself for a moment.
Well, I will explain it in the next couple of slides, I promise.
Okay.
It's quite important, this bit. But the other thing I also want you to do is, when I show you any of the stuff you get out of the box from Microsoft with Excel on Power BI, or any of the stuff you do with our add-in, I want you to make one thing a promise to me, is that you don't believe a word that I say, okay? And that's the other thing that's slightly different. And I want you to extend that to every YouTube video you watch on Power BI and Excel, because I think the other thing I'm noticing more and more is that, we never know anything works unless it is actually working on your data, in your environment, with your application complexity, with your business logic, with your data volumes. So one of the things I think is really important here is that we always challenge this and say, okay, if this is cool, let me try it on my data and see, does it scale? Does it work efficiently? Because there's a lot of rubbish going on in the YouTube community. So I want us to be really open as we go through this.
Okay.
And if I look at the agenda for today, I know there's obviously, we'll watch people like Patrick and Guy in a Cube go, let's just dive straight into my laptop and start going through it. And I get why people want to do that. But it is important, that comment I made earlier on about Power Query, it's important that you realize that 2024, the Microsoft BI architecture has changed beyond all recognition. And you need to be cognizant of that, because in 21-22, there were some difficult choices to make. And I want to go over how that's evolved and cover the point that I just made. The other thing you need to think of from both an Excel and Power BI perspective is that if you're dealing with a big project or a small project, there are huge differences in the way you approach that. And you need to be aware of those, because you will have less time to do certain things. And one of those things you'll have less time to do as you start scaling stuff up is the reporting side. So you need to deliver more quicker. And the other thing is when we sell Power BI into customers, and when I say that, I mean customers from a vendor or consultant point of view, but I also mean the management team, I guess, if you're an internal person and you're trying to promote a Power BI app to replace what you have, be very careful with the people that you're selling to actually hear what you've sold. And I want to cover a couple of points there, because you can get yourself into really big trouble quickly if you don't adhere to this. And then we'll get into Excel. So we'll say, what does Microsoft give you out of the box? So if I've got Power BI now, and I just say, I want to use a vanilla environment, what can I get from Microsoft? And then we're going to extend that and say, okay, well, why do we think customers need a lot more than that? And this is not theory. This is not us as a vendor thinking, oh, I wonder if we could do that. That looks pretty cool. Not at all. Everything in our product is based on people wanting, or more importantly, needing to do things in Excel that we can't do from the standard offering. And then we'll look at the end of next steps. How do you get hold of our Excel add-in? Try it yourself. Our add-in is a freemium product. So there is a free version you can get hold of, which will allow you to connect the Excel add-in to your Power BI data sets, as long as they are PPU or premium. And I'll cover on the reasons why it needs to be that. And also, we built a huge demonstration from within it. So when you download the software, it's not you just download the software and, oh, I've got to start from scratch. You can run everything that you see today, you will be able to access from your workstation. And the other thing that I was talking to Danielle about was also then getting an exclusive free 60-minute clinic session where you could install the software, and then we can actually look at it on your data and start seeing what you can get out of it.
Wow.
So the whole thing. Okay, so yeah, so the whole thing's going to take up to about 45 minutes, and we can make it longer or shorter based on, I guess, questions. But please keep the questions coming, and I'll rely on Danielle to either interrupt me along or at the end. So 21-22, why was there confusion? Well, if we look, there was 4 different ways, and probably some of you out there would argue there's more than 4 ways, but these were the kind of 4 main ways we came across. Small company, you know, Danielle said to me, I think in the session last July, she was one of my customers. Maybe I should have put Power BI into, I don't know, but they didn't really want dashboards, and they didn't want the cost of Power BI. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to take a load of CSV files, crunch them in Power Query, which they've got in Excel, and produce an Excel model to do all their reporting. So that at face value is cool, isn't it? Because there's no cost involved there, bit of effort. Power Query is very powerful, having just slagged it off in Excel, and you can build your model. But, and these are where the big buts are, you're fundamentally building a single user model. And the more data you get in there, the more unwieldy your Excel workbook will become, and the more unlikely you'll be able to get it around. And then suddenly Danielle has a look at this and really likes it and says, well, I want to have access to that, but I only want to have access, of course, to Australia. And I'm going, yeah, and I like the look of that as well, but I only want to have access to the UK. And my colleague looks at that and goes, yeah, but I only want to have access to the UK, but only for London. And now we are in deep, deep trouble. And so you go, okay, well, that's not the end of the world. I've got Power Query in Power BI. So I'll stick it in a Power BI Pro model now, and I can do all the same stuff again. And this time I can put my pivot tables on the Power BI model, and also I can build Power BI dashboards. So even if they're not using it at the moment, you know, maybe then we can do some Power BI dashboards and have Power BI and Excel on them. And then you think, okay, that's all right, but this has limitations in terms of scalability. It does have limitations in terms of application complexity, has limitations in terms of realistically the number of users you can support on it. And so you then go into a completely different model. And then you go, okay, and this is where a lot of my life has come from in when we started this in 2000 with the Microsoft stack. You say, okay, well, we won't use Power Query at all. We'll use T-SQL, and we'll use all the back-end ETL tools, and we'll load it into a cube of data analysis services, and might be in Azure, might be a tabular model, might be a multidimensional model, and then we can load it all in there. This has limitless almost scalability, and I can put Excel and Power BI, and for the first time in these architectures, I can put third-party products on it, like Excel in Business's ReportStudio within Excel. That can connect to these, and that can round off the actual solution. And then, of course, you've got Microsoft coming along saying, yeah, but if you're really doing it at the big enterprise level, the good news is you need Power BI Premium, because this can scale limitlessly. It's using Power Query to do a lot of the manipulation. You can attach now third-party add-ins to it through the XML interface, and life is good. Now, I think people in the US would probably refer to this slide as a marketecture, because it all looks really simple on a slide. And you go, yeah, okay, I get where I need to be, and I just plug into one of those. But the big but here is if you get this wrong, it's catastrophic. If you start there and you need to be there, or you start here and you need to be there, or you start here and you need to be there, it is bad news. It is cost, it is rework. It might be a complete rewrite in some instances. Now, I know some of the more sharper amongst you might look at this and kind of go, yeah, but hold on. If you look at medium business and enterprise, that's pretty similar. And you can easily upgrade a Power BI Pro model to a Power BI Premium. So why don't you convince these guys to go to the medium and these guys to go to the enterprise? And then you've got seamless architecture. Why wouldn't you do that? And technically, that was absolutely sound. But the downside was now is if I was looking at, and I'm sorry, I haven't done it in Aussie dollars for in Australia, but I've done it in sterling, USD, and euros. If I've got a 10-user Power BI Pro system, in my country, I'm into £82 a month for a 10-user application. And if I now run out of puff and I need to move it to a Power BI Premium application, it's a bit of a sales job. I've got to go, you're £82 a month. Yeah, slight upgrade. Does £4,105 a month sound okay? A month. So I've gone from less than sort of £1,000 a year to nearly a £50,000 application. All I've done is change the Power BI engine. Now, thank you, Microsoft. There is an industry game changer. This is the best thing Microsoft have done, the second best thing Microsoft done, and the third best thing Microsoft have done. Oh, thank you. They introduced this concept of Power BI Premium per user. This is a massive, massive game changer, because what this allows you to do now is it allows you to have all the power of Premium, does everything that Pro does, and it allows you now to have much bigger models. And it allows us, from a software vendor point of view, to have XML support, which all that means to you is it means third-party software products can fit on top of that to round out the whole Microsoft solution. So in 2024, I would advocate the world is very different. There's only one architecture from my mind. And even if you were Danielle's customer that was saying, I don't want Power BI, I just want an Excel system, well, the first thing you do is buy Power BI. You buy Power BI as a premium per user license, and you use a much better version of Power Query, which is in Power BI, and it's a much more forward-looking version. And you crank all your data into the Power BI model. And if you just want an Excel solution, you just use Excel on front of it in the same way you would have done with Power Query in Excel. But the difference, of course, here is this is a lot more scalable. And the difference is when Danielle says she only wants access to Australia and I only want access to the UK, it's a piece of cake. There's a different role. Done. Simple. So be very, very careful here, because I think Danielle said, yeah, but that's all very well you saying that, but you've still got cost involved. Okay, so I've got £160 a month to do this that I wouldn't have if I did it in Excel. But come on, there's a saying we have in England called pound wise, penny foolish. And this is an example of penny foolish, in my opinion, if you use Power Query in Excel, because you can convince yourself it's cheaper. It's not. It's only cheaper if you've got a single user model. As soon as you want to get this information out to people, you're in big trouble, and you're going to spend a lot of time manually producing Excel workbooks that you're going to give different slices of the data to. It becomes an uncontrollable mess, where this stuff is elegant. Plus, of course, you get the benefits of, if you want to scale that up, you can immediately connect our add into this if you need more functionality when the customer is ready. Maybe they're not ready for dashboards now, but next year they are. You don't have to rework this. You just say, cool, data's already in Power BI. Just connect Power BI dashboards to it. And more importantly, as Microsoft start developing stuff, you can also now add things like PowerPoint and Teams on top of that. So the reason why I'm so excited with this thing, this architecture, it's the first time in my life, and as I said, I've spent a lot of my life in business intelligence, that we do have an architecture from Microsoft that scales from the SME to the enterprise, but it scales both commercially and technically. How cool is that? So hopefully that backs up, and we can come back to that at the end, but that backs up my reason of why you don't need Power Query in Excel, because this is so elegant going forward. So you now have the consideration is small apps versus enterprise apps. One of the issues you've got to face here is if I'm looking at small apps, I spend my time very differently. Small apps, and I'm not going to get into defining the differences here, but fundamentally to say a small app, I'm probably in control of the data. Maybe I've got some Excel workbooks or CSV files that I know that I'm using now in an Excel application, and I'm going to convert those and load them into a Power BI model. So I only have to spend about 10% of my time on the data because I know the data already, and I know that it's not massive. So if I have to reload this 50 times, I don't really care. Reload it every few minutes if I need to. And I don't really need to spend that much on the model design because typically if the data is coming in from Excel or CSVs, it's not going to be that big. It's not going to be that much complex. So I've got to add time intelligence in here. I might have to add hierarchies in here. And that's pretty much it. And the lovely thing about this is I've got 65% of my time I can focus on the output and look at what can I deliver in Power BI, what can I deliver in Excel. Enterprise, it's very, very different. We have an application we're working on at the moment where the summary data warehouse is about 3 terabytes of data. We're loading in data from 1990 to 2024. So we've got 30 years worth of data. The data is pretty bad and we have to put loads and loads of checks in that. So 50% of the application time here is actually just focusing on the data, because we all know there's no point producing this glossy dashboard if then the person looks at it and goes, well, that's just wrong. Now, of course, when you're dealing with those sort of volumes, the other thing you need to get right is the database design, because whereas here, I can go, you know what, I can reload this 15 times a day. I don't really care. It takes minutes. This to rebuild this particular customer, if you did a full rebuild, it would take about a week to reload all the data, did a full rebuild. So you can imagine we're very keen not to do that, and they're very keen on not to do that. So the amount of effort that goes into making sure there are routines to do incremental loads properly, none of which you get out of the box with any of this stuff, you have to really think about that. And of course, the downside means you're only left about 5% of your time to actually build the reports. Now, don't mishear me here. This doesn't mean to say because everyone accepts this, that your output can be rubbish and you can deliver anything. Not at all. Typically, enterprise applications, the people paying the money there will expect the output to be even better than here. But the downside is you've got much, much less time. So that's where you do also need to think about the tools you use to make sure you're really productive. So just before we get onto the demo, so let's have a look at Excel considerations and what you need to be careful of and why I think you need add-ins like ours to complement the solution. Now, what do MI companies have before Power BI? I bet you'll be staggered to know it's Excel, of course. So when you're normally trying to upgrade people, a lot of the time, people will be using CSV downloads, ADBC, they might have some pivot tables in, and they're probably going to be, as in Danielle's exercise last year, they might have one sheet per customer product region, and there's someone in the company who knows. It's always one person, it seems to me.
Oh, whether come on. I'm never going to live that down, Paul.
I know. Well, don't forget, though, I felt humiliated for a day and 3 quarters, so I was very happy that there was a little bit of payback at the end of this. And the other issue they have is that often the time when they present their final numbers, they have manual inputs that no one knows about. And you can argue whether this is right or wrong, but they might say, okay, we've done a detailed forecast, we've got all the forecasts in, but gut feel says we tend to always exaggerate 5% or 3% in months 1 and 10 and 11. So I'm just going to put that into an Excel model before I present the final numbers, because I think that is more realistic. And then you've got, obviously, the psychological aspects we never consider. When people talk to us about moving these models into Power BI, yes, they might be crappy. You look at the top right-hand side there and you think, wow, yeah, that looks thrilling. But they've typically been used for years, and they are generally accepted by management of the way that the company runs its business. Now, despite all that, of course, they wouldn't be talking to us or you if they didn't see a problem. So most people generally accept when they're starting this transition to Power BI that, yes, they can't change anything in their existing models. It's just way too complicated to actually do that. And new analysis take forever because you've only got the one person who's brave enough or is trusted enough to actually do it. And the information is typically out of date because it takes them 3-4 days at period end to make sure they've done all their checks and in their Excel formula to check that the data all adds up. And the spreadsheets become huge, which make them hard to distribute, hard to maintain. And they probably would accept that even though they've got this one person who's a genius in the company, there is a risk that perhaps all the VLOOKUPs, XLOOKUPs, SUMIFs don't really add up the numbers correctly. So what do? We kind of ignore the first two. Go, yeah, stuff's rubbish there. Yeah. No. You're right. These are the issues. These are the issues. And boy, have we got the solution for you. What we're going to do is we're going to move all that data into Power BI. It's going to be great. You're going to get clear presentation. Graphs show trends a lot easier than wading your way through loads of numbers in Excel. You want to drill down? You can drill down anyway. You can have n levels of hierarchies. You can get access to the underlying detail. It's all cool. Infrastructure, fantastic. Just need a browser or a mobile device or both. You've got centralized data management, one version of the proverbial truth. And yeah, if you want to build stuff, if you're new to Power BI, might take a day, it might take 2 days to build a dashboard if you're not really familiar with it, but it's not the weeks that you're experiencing now and the fear that you have. That's all cool. And your old Excel spreadsheets, yeah, you probably get rid of those. Yeah, we're going to make these. Look at this. Doesn't that look so much better than that awful spreadsheet I showed you on the previous slide? But here's the thing you need to be really, really careful is because what the customer actually hears and thinks they're agreeing to is they buy all your messages of the dashboards and Power BI, quicker time to market, faster turnaround at period end, ROI. I get all my information out there quickly. I can easily make it dynamic. It all looks really cool. I can be using it on the golf course with my mobile phone, all lovely stuff. But, and here is the big but, they say, well, if you can do all this cool stuff here, then obviously this rubbish that I produce at the moment, you can easily reproduce that. And that is a real warning sign because they just think, so my management team can carry on. They can still run this. Now you can argue, but we should be educating them here and telling them they shouldn't be using this. I've been around long enough to know that whilst I would agree with all that, there are certain things you can't. If people trust a certain report, they want to see that report exactly as it is in the new application. And now you are in trouble. It's not a good place to start a project because what tends to happen is the customer will often keep their old spreadsheets and do the Power BI. So now you've actually made the situation worse from a maintenance point of view. Whilst this is obviously a lot less, it's now adding to what's already there rather than replacing it. So the reality check I want you to take is if you look at Power BI dashboards and you think you're going to actually replace an established, existing, proven XLMI app, you're not. You're really not, certainly not with the standard technology. And this, of course, is where we come in, unless the Power BI Excel integration meets what's there now. If I can say I can store all the data in Power BI, but I can still produce that crappy report if you need to, life's good. Because then, even if you are trying to educate them away from this, you're educating from a position of strength. If I say I can do this, and I'll do it for you, I'll build this into there, it's fine. But do you really want to be doing that? That's a world of difference from trying to saying what you're doing here is wrong. You should be doing this. And you're saying that because you can't reproduce this. So that is where things like the add-in that we provide kick in. And I'll come on to that. So that really is enough of the talking. I want to spend the next 20 minutes actually just going through what you now get from Microsoft and what we can add to that. So I think this is a good point in time. I think you mentioned Danielle just pausing a second. And is there any questions we need to take at the moment?
No, we just kind of stuck on the whole Power Query thing. I think the chat's been kind of pretty much dedicated to that. I think you must have known that it would by my reaction. So can we just come back to that? Like, so you're saying that because Power BI is so good, Power Query and Power BI is so good that we no longer need to have Power Query in Excel. Is that basically what you were saying?
Yeah, I think what I'm saying, I mean, one of the things that I guess I'm lucky about not being a Microsoft MVP is I can really, I guess, say what I want, and I don't know any of the non-disclosure stuff, so I can't give anything away. But I've worked with Microsoft long enough to know that when they start doing things, you know where they're going with it. So, when you looked at things like analysis services, multidimensional, you realize they weren't going to develop that further when they started actually then stressing there was all loads of new functionality, but it only existed on Tableau and Power BI. You started to realize that now in Power Query. Originally the code sets were fairly equal. Now you're seeing them putting a lot more effort into Power BI than you are in Excel. And I think if you're starting from scratch, I think Microsoft will do what they'll always do. They won't kill it, obviously, so don't anyone think, oh my God, Power Query is going to be removed. But they'll just kill it by I'll just kill it by stealth. There'll be 15 new amazing things in a year's time, in my opinion, you'll be able to do in Power BI, but you won't be able to do in the Excel version of Power Query. So they just kill it by stealth over time.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think they're right. Because
yeah.
where's the downside? I'm not being I'll flip it the other way. Where's the downside of having the data in Power BI and there's nothing that you're losing?
Because we are so completely hooked on our spreadsheets. We just do not want to relinquish our spreadsheet. We're so used to seeing the grid and we're so used to using our formulas in Excel. It is really hard to tear us away from using Excel. And I think that's going to be the real challenge.
I'm not stopping you there. I agree with that, and I'm not stopping you there. But in the same way as with as a user of your spreadsheet, I don't see all the Power Query stuff behind that. You've packaged that all for me. It's no different. What I'm advocating is no different from using Excel on the front of Power BI. In terms of, as a user, I don't see what you've done in Power Query and Excel. As a user, I don't see what you've done in Power Query and Power BI. But I do get the benefits from it, which I don't get with the Excel solution.
Okay. Well, show us. If there's any other questions, feel free to, anything not related to the possibility of not having Power Query in Excel, any other questions, feel free to pop those in there. Otherwise, we'll let Paul get into his demo.
Okay, so I mean, in just do an insurance app here that we built in Power BI and using Excel and our own product on top of it. So what's the first thing you can do in Excel? The first thing you can do in Excel is you can export data from a flat table. So I can go to a visual here, and if I click on export data, I have options in some cases of what level of data I want to take out. If I've got a lot of data, I can set maximum rows on there. And when I click on export, that will now actually export that data. And if I crank that up, that should then load Excel. So this is what I'm looking at initially, is just purely stuff that you can do out of the box with Microsoft. So you can see, okay, you can argue that's not the most stunning report that they give you out of the box, but of course we can then do, sorry, Danielle, I'll just re-emphasize my fact of lack of keyboard knowledge, but I can kind of go that even a noddy user like me can actually kind of just, smarten this up pretty quickly. And then I've got an analysis there where I've got something take off. I'm sorry, I'm really anal about grid lines and headings. I hate them. So, there you go. So I've smartened this up and it looks half decent. And you say, okay, well, that's quite cool. And it is, for doing an ad hoc one-off, nothing wrong with that. Really good. But of course, this is static, totally static. So this means obviously then that that if I wanted to do this analysis next time, then I would obviously then have to go and do this all again and run the extract again and probably reformat it, etc., etc. So not brilliant, but it serves a purpose. Like everything else, it serves a purpose, and you can do that. I don't think this is disabled. I mean, certain things in Power BI you can disable from the tenant and stop people from doing it. I think this one is pretty standard. I think you can do this pretty much anywhere. The second thing you can do is go, no, I want to be a bit more interactive than that. So I can export this data, but I can analyze it in Excel. Now, this is a tenant setting. I think the default is on. Someone might want to correct me on that. But you might not see this. If you don't see this, you'd have to ask whoever looks after your Power BI tenant to actually do that. And then what that would do is that will open it by default on Excel and the web, or not. And the reason why that is, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place.
We love that message. Yes, that is.
Yeah,
I see that message too often.
Yeah, well, what it is I'm logged in personally there rather than using our demo user. So it's basically authenticated me in Power BI, and then when I've tried to be authenticated in Excel, it's not allowing me to do that. So let's try that again from where hopefully I am authenticated. So I do analyze in Excel. It'll create the Excel file for me. I can open that. And what that's going to do now is it's going to build a brand new pivot table for me. I'll enable that. And then I enable content. and then I've got my model. So now this is my Power BI model in Excel. So now just thinking back now to the old argument on Power Query, this is now no different. You know, this is no different from you using the pivot tables now on top of your Power Query you've embedded in Excel. No different at all. So you're not losing anything that you can do in Excel, but you've got a lot more control.
And is
Obviously,
that's the data is still stored in Power BI, yeah?
so the data here is stored in Power BI. So
Yeah,
all of
it
this,
looked like it was making a copy, because when it downloaded, I thought, oh, we're actually just making a copy of the data, but no, we're actually creating a file that is going to hook into your data in Power BI. Is that right?
correct. That's exactly. So what's actually happening here is we are doing a live query into your Power BI model. So this is all familiar to you guys. The people who you all cool on Power Query in Excel. This is what you're doing now, building a pivot table on your Power Query. The only difference is you're doing it from Power BI rather than from the Excel model. That's the only difference here. And you can see here, you know, I can build this, and I'm not going to go through in detail on pivot tables. You get the idea. Now, of course, the nice thing about this is if I save this away, then next time I open this, then it will refresh the data from Power BI dynamically. So if you've added new data, added new months, obviously that will pick that up dynamically without you doing anything. But again, give some thought. What do I actually do now with this? I've got this report, but now if I want to get it out to a number of users, how does that work? How do I now package it? And I don't have time to cover that in this session here, but it's stuff to think of because we do handle things like that. And
so I guess my initial thing that I want to do here is to go back into the data and, you know, do a bit of filtering or, you know, just some cleansing of the data. And you would do that back in Power BI, yeah?
You do it in Power Query in Power BI.
Yeah.
So you do exactly the same as you're doing in Excel, but you'd use the Power Query.
And can you do that from this screen?
You can't do it from the screen. No. That's so okay. I would give you that, Danielle. I would give you that. You would have to do that in Power BI Desktop.
Okay.
Yes, I would give you that. So that's an interesting point. But I couldn't think of any advantage whatsoever. That perhaps is one advantage, but I don't think it matches obviously the other bits of the benefits you get in terms of being able to scale this up. Because of course the nice thing is one of the problems you have with Power Query is when you use pivot tables on top of that Power Query in Excel, you are caching that data. So you're making your Excel workbooks even bigger based on the data that you're already holding in the Excel workbook. I'll give you a practical example of that. I did a COVID model in Excel and a COVID model in Power BI, exactly the same Power Query. After 4 months, my Excel model was 80 megabytes. My Power BI model was 6 megabytes.
Wow.
Exactly the same.
Oh.
Okay, so the last thing you've got that you can do here is if I go back, sorry, I'm going all over the place. If I go back to my Excel on my local machine.
We're with you.
And the reason why, I don't know, again, someone might be able to help me with this, is that I'm logged into Excel in the same user on my demo machine as I am here. But in one machine, I see this insert pivot table, and I see this from Power BI. I don't see it in the other. I don't know why, genuinely don't. But this is, again, if you've got a PPU license and you've got Office 365 desktop, this is something new that's quite nice that Microsoft introduced, where the previous two examples I showed you, I started in Power BI and then went to Excel, if you remember. I started in the Power BI visual and then actually then went back and got it. Here, I'm starting in Excel, and I can either insert a table based on Power BI data, or I can insert a pivot table. So now what I'm doing, I'm actually starting the same thing, but now from within the comforts of Excel. So if you said to me, well, I want to build Excel reports, but I don't even want to go near Power BI because I'm so Excel centric. So I don't even want to go in and look at a dashboard and do analyze in Excel. Then you can start here. I'm not going to build the same pivot table. There's no point in doing that, but you get the point, exactly the same, but I'm now in Excel. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'll go across again and I'll just shut this spreadsheet down. So that's the sort of stuff that you can do out of the box with Microsoft. And I think you'll agree, it's pretty powerful. You can obviously make things much more dynamic. But what I want to do now is actually have a look at, okay, how do we connect from a third-party tool like Excel and Business Report Studio? So what we've done here is we've installed the add-in, and you can see that you've got all the ribbons you know and love in Excel, but also you've got ribbons here starting EIB for Excel and Business, and you can do stuff associated with those ribbons. So if I want to build a new Power BI report, I go into EIB Power BI and I do new from Power BI and connect to it. Now, when you say from Power BI, you need to have a server that you connect to in the same way as you would as if you're building it from a normal database like an analysis services cube. Now, where do you get that server from? If I just go back to Power BI, you'll see now why you have to have Power BI premium per user models for this to work. Because if I go to my workspaces here, you'll see that some of these workspaces have nothing against them. And some of them, I don't even know what this is, have like a diamond shape against them. And the diamond ones mean they are a PPU, a Power BI premium per user workspace. And why do you care about that? Well, I'll show you. If I go to the workspace settings here and click on premium, you'll see that obviously it will tell me now I'm a premium per user license. But when I scroll down, you'll see at the bottom, it has, oh, sorry, I'm going to have to move this across here. If I just move it to there a second. Can you see this connection here? That effectively is the server.
Yes,
if you copy that string, that will allow you to connect from any third-party tool to your Power BI data set. That is effectively the server that the front-end tool would see. Now, if I just contrast that and go back to a non-PPU workspace, so if I just pick this one, you'll see when I go into the workspace settings and I click on premium, it says, well, of course, you're not a premium user, you're a pro user here. And when you scroll down, there is nothing. So I don't think there's any technical restriction that Microsoft imposed other than they don't tell you what the server is. So you have no way of connecting whatsoever. So that's why when you're using third-party products, you do need the XMLA support, which is given to you by Power BI Premium per user. Okay, so one of the things as well is if you're thinking of delivering Excel applications, one of the things you want to be able to do here is obviously package these applications. You know, I'm not happy for casual users to come in and do file open. That's way too difficult. So what you can do here is the way our users use the Excel application was they would see this, and this is what you'll see when you download the software. So this is a much more pleasant experience if I'm using reports. Now, one of the things I majored on was I said to you, we have to be able to replace what's there now. So what I've done here is I've just taken an Excel report that I downloaded off the internet. So I looked for cool looking Excel reports, and this is a flat file, and you download it off the internet. And it says, if you fill in the details, which you would do, I guess, in a normal Excel system, you would have perhaps one area where you have the working data, and then you point all your final output to it. Then the nice thing is it will produce this flat Excel workbook, but it is flat. So again, if we were doing the exercise, sorry, Danielle, that we were doing with Danielle, I would obviously have to then have the ability to add my 6 spreadsheets together and then manually pick them as slices. So what did I do? I just said, okay, well, if that is your existing MI, then the good news is if I make that now an EIB report, hopefully when this opens, you should see nothing. There's no difference. And this comes back to my point in terms of if you want to be able to carry on with what you've got. But of course, the difference is my data is being sourced by Power BI. So rather than having my 6 workbooks all trying to add those up and keep track of them, here I just double click, connect to the Power BI model, select the company I'm interested in, and it magically refreshes. And I mentioned to you that one of my colleagues only has access to London. So again, I can then actually flip that and then look at it by London. So this is the point, and this is the opportunity for us, is we can deliver what people have now, and we can make it better, and we can centralize it all with Power BI, and we can use Excel in a very effective way on top of what you have. Okay, so the next thing I just wanted to go into, just sorry, I've just lost my notes here. Was I wanted to look at one of the other things we add was if I look at this more sort of financial type report, the other things we wanted to add was things like, can I make the formatting more dynamic? So when people drill down in Excel, it's a bit more obvious. So this is one of our reports sitting on top of a Power BI model here. But you can see here, I've got plus signs, which shows me where I can drill down. Hopefully it looks like a Power BI report. All of our reports are native Excel reports, so they're not like pivot tables where you have an imposed grid on there. So you can use Excel formulas where you like. But if I took, say, 2019 and drill down, you'll see that I've got formatting for when 2019 is drilled up. And when I drill down, it changes the formatting. So it's a bit more obvious where I've actually drilled down from. And if I extend that and drill down on Q2, it then drills me down into further levels. And I can see very clearly that I drill down into quarters and then I drill back up. So perhaps minor things, but things that are quite important to the end users, just to make reporting a bit simpler. And I can obviously now drill down selectively in here and apply the same sort of logic. If I drill up on sales to make that actually just a summarized line, you'll see the formatting has changed and just gone back to blank. So I've got my total then nicely underneath. So I can mix and match the formatting to make things hopefully a bit easier for end users. Then the next thing I wanted to do was actually interact with the data. This, I think, is one of the biggest shortcomings I see with standard Excel and Power BI, is a lot of the time we want to interact. You know, why do we love? You know, Danielle said, oh, we just love Excel. Why do we love it? Because we can do stuff in it. If it doesn't give us the standard stuff we want from a pivot table or whatever, we can somehow interact with that. So here, I've got two queries into a Power BI model, and they're synced on policy number. One is showing driver behavior, one is showing policy detail. If I double click on here on the policy, as I change the policy in one query, it will change the policy dynamically in another. But more importantly, I can also change just using an Excel cell. If I change the color coding here, it will drive that dynamically back to the Power BI query and color code accordingly. The other thing I can do is stuff that perhaps Excel users want to do that typically doesn't really suit a BI tool. Oh, sorry, I'll just run that report again. That's not too smart, was it? And this is a good example of that. And I just want you to bear in mind this, and we'll come on in a second to actually how we build stuff. If I look at this report here, you can see that I've got a very simple high-level report of sales, profit, and net profit based on a Power BI model. But what I can do here is I can double-click on actuals, and this again is nothing amazing, and it now extrapolates the actuals. But what I've seen that most financial users want to do is they want to home in on a period, perhaps say May, and double-click on that and freeze actuals to May, and then extrapolate the budgets to the end of the
That is cool. That is cool. We just had a question from Ametha saying, how would this work with actual budget versus actuals when you're forecasting data over time? Is that something you're going to get into, is the forecasting piece? Because what you've got here is actuals and budget, which is great. So is there functionality to do some forecasting in there? I guess you could just build the formulas, couldn't you?
Not per se. No, we would rely on you doing the actual. I mean, sorry, that's not strictly true. But for all intents of this session, the add-in here is purely looking at the reporting side of the Power BI model.
So it's not you're looking backwards, not looking. You're not using it for forecasting in this instance, but you could.
Well, we could, and obviously, if the Power BI model reflects that. So, for example, here, if I went back to the top report and drill down on forecast here and froze here, I could also see my actuals versus forecast, and I could also do an actual versus budget versus forecast comparison. And in some cases, we've taken that to the extreme. If you take this one, this is a bit to the extreme, to be honest. But this came into as a requirement because, actually, no, it doesn't. That's not the one I was looking for. Just bear with me one second. Sorry, I don't think I have got it in this demo. But what we did was we had an ability where you could actually pick on every single column in the columns whether you wanted actuals, budget, or forecast. And the reason why we did that was a customer said, we rely on our forecasts only for the next 2 months. And then we rely on our budgets from the third month to the end of the year. So what we were doing was we were actuals month 1 to 6, but forecasts month 7 to 8, and then budget month 9 to 12, and then an outturn position being the sum of all of those.
So Vicky's asking if you do, so you're like your rolling forecast or whatever sort of calculations, you would have to do that separately. Yeah, you wouldn't do it inside the tool, or you'd do that outside?
You would do that in the Power BI model.
Right, it would be part of the model.
Yeah, because what we're looking at here is we're looking at the reporting side of it. So yes, we can do some clever things like the way we lay the information out, but we're relying on the Power BI model to actually do the storing, because obviously ultimately the data has to exist in the Power BI model. Otherwise, we're kind of bypassing the single version of the truth stuff.
Yeah, she's also asking whether you can have, like, you could do this reporting in the app, and then could you have an accounting system that would pick up the actuals? But
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one of the things to take, and I mean, this is an extreme version of that. But if you had, things obviously in that example, you could bring the accounting data, which we do a lot of time, into a Power BI model, and then have the budgets and forecasts loaded from Excel. And then, of course, once it's in the Power BI model, obviously at this level, you don't know where the information's come from. But if you multiple different systems, this is
so it could be coming from different places, but you wouldn't take this and bring it back into the accounting system, because that's where it would be coming from. Your forecasting would be done in Power BI, and then
yes, it could be. You could load it back into if you said, well, hold on, a lot of people don't like accounting systems for doing forecasting because they don't think they're very functional. So if you said, well, there are buckets in the accounting system that allow to store forecast, but we'd rather do the forecasting in Power BI and then write that data back into the GL. There's nothing to stop you architecturally from doing that.
Okay. Cool.
That is fine.
Yeah.
But we would do when we do this in existing customers, we would never ever allow you to do that. Obviously, for actuals or budgets, we would always say actual and budgets come from the accounting system, because if it has the ability to do that, then you don't want to obviously then have, well, where did that data come from? Well, it doesn't match the accounting system. But if you then want to add to that, that's fine. So this is just a daft example of an extreme here, where I'm taking data from. So if you need to bring data together, we're talking about Power BI here. But this top report is from Power BI. That's from a multidimensional finance cube. That's from a tabular model, and that's from a SQL database, all loaded into one report, all accessible, all live, all interactive. So if you do have different places where you're getting your data, then that's absolutely fine. Okay, just a couple of things that I want to then show you, just in terms of actually building stuff. Just conscious of time here.
So yeah, we've got about 7 minutes or so left, Paul.
Okay, all right. So maybe what I'll do then is actually start actually just showing you from the ground up, because everything so far, hopefully you found as interesting, but it's kind of pre-canned. So what I want to do here is I'm going to go into building a brand new report from scratch. I'm going to connect to Power BI, and I'm going to connect to our insurance demo. And that now is going to connect me from Excel to Power BI. This is the workspace. And then it's going to allow me to connect to my model. And then it's going to allow me then to bring up the data. And what I'm going to do now, you can see on the right-hand side, there's a very powerful query engine here that we can build, but I'm just not going to worry about that at the moment. One thing we do, which is really nice, is we treat measures the same as any other dimension. So whereas in Power BI and pivot tables, you have to be a bit careful how you treat measures, here I can just display measures and immediately it just behaves as any other dimension, where I can just pick from the measures accordingly. So that really is quite nice if you're involved in the detail of producing these reports. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to cancel that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at, if I look under premiums and premium details, I'm going to do certain things. I'm going to take the measures out of the rows. Now I've got nothing in the rows, so it's saying I can't draw the report. I'm going to put the broker in the rows and double click on that. And I'm going to put scheme, I think, in the columns. So what I'm going to do is, so fairly simple stuff, very analogous to a pivot table, but there is a lot more power here. I won't bore you with that now. You can have a look at that. So if I double click on that and drill, I've got scheme. Now, one of the things that allows we can do here, and what I really like, is we need to be able to interact this data. What happens if we want to produce a top N type report? Then what we can do, of course, is I can click on here and go into my Power BI ribbon here and say, I want to filter the data. And I want to add a new filter. And I want to be able to produce the top 10. And I don't want to include the all row in that. I just want the brokers being sorted. So I always want to see the all, and then I want a top 10. So that's kind of nice. So that's the sort of stuff you can do in Power BI. But that's not good enough because I want to be able to interact with this data. So what I can do here is I can actually say, okay, if I put the formula bar in, I want to give this as I don't have to make this a name range, but I just think it's neater. If I just say top N here, and I put in a value 10 here, then I can go back into the filter and I can say review current filter. And instead of making that a top 10, I can say base that on top N. And now when I apply that, hopefully you shouldn't see any difference, and you don't. But of course, the beauty is now I can start saying, well, I want to make that a top 5 filter. And we have this level of interaction all over the place. And of course, now you can start doing what we like to do in Excel and say, well, I also want to see the contribution of that. So I can now obviously make that equal to the sum of, let me say that to say, I don't know, the 20,000. And make that there. And then I can obviously then do contribution percent. And this is, again, an area where it's very big that makes a massive change, because obviously now you can do that one is equal to that over that. And I'm now starting to interact with Excel. So, you know, as well as being very powerful to build things out, you can start really interacting with this data in a way that you couldn't do before. Now, the other thing you might want to do with this is you might want to be able to allow users to be able to go off-road without having to know the product. So one of the things you can do here is building what we call a train of thought analysis, where you can actually say, okay, I want the user to be able to do things off-road, but I don't want them to know how to actually use the product. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just set this up in advance. So I'm going to say I want the user to be able to vary the data by broker, which they can at the moment. And I want them also to be able to do it by perhaps car brand as well for this motor insurance thing. And I want to allow them to do that. And I might want to also allow them to do it by, I don't know, something else, by policy number, source, policy type, maybe. Now, what I would do now is if I save this report away, nothing will happen to the report. The report will open as it does now. But the nice thing I can do is I can right-click on this data and say, right, I want to do a train of thought, and I want to analyze that by car brand. And that will build a brand new report for me on the fly and analyze that by car brand. And this is really important, because if you don't have a lot of time to work on a project, rather than build hundreds of Excel reports where you're kind of going, okay, I've got every combination, I've got it now by car brand, I've got it by everything, I can just actually build this up and allow the users to go off-road, but without having to, know the product. And I can then carry on that train of thought and analyze commercial vehicle by broker, and it will then build another brand new report for me. And last but not least,
you're basically getting that functionality in Power BI, but within Excel.
Well, I would argue not, because even in Power BI, you can't easily do that on the fly. Because remember, once this is set up, I can do this on the fly. and it makes it very easy for an end user to traverse the data. And the thing I was going to show you, but I don't have time, so I'm just going
Oh,
to show you
yes,
the
we are just about out of time.
yeah, for it, because I'll just finish on one thing I want to show you to round it off. Was also sometimes we have to produce static content of data. So if I look at this here, is what you can do is you can build a report in the way that we've run it, but actually what you can do is you can package it so that it goes behind the scenes and runs a report pack and produces it for each company here. And this is a static representation of each company. So if you're trying to get information out to shareholders, or you just want to do a point in time audit because your data might change historically, you can run all of that very, very easily. So that was a kind of whistle stop tour into it. I'm kind of finished. I want to talk a little bit, obviously, about how you get the software, but I hope that was useful.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, just let us, maybe you could just recap on how I'll send out a link to everybody probably tomorrow with how they can get this and how it all works. So is that what are you, is it like a license that you're giving? Is it a perpetual license or how does it work?
Yeah, so what you're sorry, what you do is if you go to this URL, you can download the software. That will download the software, and it'll also come with all the stuff that you've been seeing. The pre-packaged demo will come with it. You can also then say, okay, if I then load that software up and activate it, you'll get an activation key that will last for a year, but it will be annually renewable. It won't, if it's a free version, it won't charge you all of a sudden the next year, but
No
you can
credit
use
card
it.
details required.
No credit card details required whatsoever. Nope. And then you can book a free 60-minute consultation. And that what that should be on is you say, okay, I've got my Power BI models now. I've got the software installed. Can you show me how I can get the most out of it by putting it on my data? Because it comes back to my point. I said, don't believe it until you see it on your data.
Okay. So
And
yeah,
then of
so
course,
people can check in with you and find out. Yeah. And I presume there's information about ongoing costs.
yes,
Big
if you
stuff,
need to
but yeah.
upgrade, basically what you get for free is a single user version that allows you to connect all your Power BI data. If you've got to roll that out to more users, you need a paid for version. Or if you want to roll it out, you'll also be able to put the report add-in on top of SQL databases, analysis services, cubes, if you have those in your organization. But it will say you can only do that in demo mode, i.e. it will allow you to do everything. It will allow you to save away. But to roll it out in a production environment, you do need a separate license to actually do that.
Yeah,
So
cool.
was there any questions that came out of that on the?
No, I think we're all good. I kind of jumped in with any questions yeah, as we went through. So yeah, I think that's about it. I will send all of that out together with the recording. So we might we'll leave it there. And what's the best way of people getting in touch with you, Paul? Shall I send out your email address or can they get in touch with you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, there is on the slide deck, but we feel happy to send
Cool.
out both
I will
the address and LinkedIn address. Happy for that. So we
great.
haven't questions at all at the end. I'm surprised.
Yeah, no, we I kind of jumped in with questions and comments as we went. So thank you everybody for your fantastic participation. Yes, I know it's been such a long time since we've done this, and I promise we will do it again soon. I met so many amazing people in London at the summit. And so I'm working on getting some more speakers for you. I am heading off to Riyadh in Saudi Arabia on Thursday of this week, so I'll be a little bit quiet for a couple of weeks, but I will be back very soon. So thank you everybody for participating. Fantastic. Thank you everybody. I'm glad you enjoyed that, and thank you so much, Paul. And I'm sure we will see more of you again.
No, thank you all
Lots
for
of
attending.
claps, lots of emojis going there. Thank you
Thank you,
everybody.
guys, and thank you, Danielle, because I know that the behind the scenes organisation is a hell of a lot of work. So thank you very much for doing that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problems. All
Any
right.
questions, guys? Just please get in contact. I'd love to hear
Yeah.
what you're doing. I'd love to hear if you hate me for slagging off Power Query, then tell me. I don't mind. I can take it. I'd just like to hear your views. Really, be good to.
Yeah. Let Paul know what you think, and I can tell you from us that Power Query is in Excel is not going anywhere. Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye.